Presentation. This is resyncing.
Oh, okay.
Let me tell you what, let's get started. My name's Doug Spindler. I'm one of the organizers for BSides this year. And I got a question for you. You're going to talk about mobile app corporate espionage, huh?
Yeah.
I read your book. No, I didn't. I read that you read a book, or wrote a book, right?
Cool. Yep.
So you have quite an interesting pedigree.
Okay. So
my question is, Apple, Android, or Windows?
I'm an Android fan.
An Android guy. You going to listen to him? Yes. I am too, by the way. Right? Because of the app. So, Mike, let me turn this over to you.
Great.
Dazzle everybody. How's that?
Sounds great.
Or convince them they should go with Apple because it's secure.
Right. Yeah, because it had almost 3 times the vulnerabilities Android had in 2015.
Ooh. What a way to lead off.
Sorry. Hey guys, my name's Mike Raggo. Work for a mobile security company. And today what I thought I would cover is mobile app corporate espionage. Sort of a mashup of a lot of research I've been doing over the years, stemming from a lot of the data hiding, covert communications, and steganography research I've been doing over the last 15 years, in conjunction with a really, really good friend of mine, Chet Hosmer, who also shares a lot of the same research and used to run a company by the name of Whetstone Technologies that did a lot of forensic research. It also incorporates a lot of additional research around mobile and mobile security. So I just got back from HackCon in Norway and presented a variety of smartwatch security research and my smartwatch attack tool known as SWATAC. So I'll highlight that in the presentation as well, because there are also implications to mobile apps as they relate to smartwatches. And then if time permits, I'll get into some mobile device, Wi-Fi, covert communications as well, around some research I've been doing for a long time as well. So rather than get into who I am or my background, just know that, if you like what you see today, a lot of it is cited in the research that Chet and I authored in our data hiding book, and then more recently, Mobile Data Loss Threats and Countermeasures. So a lot of this is citations from that book, and then also a little bit more deep dive into the actual research itself. So if we take a look at the mobile corporate espionage threat vector landscape, certainly there's a lot of risky behaviors and malware that we've seen, in particular recently around mobile apps. In the next few slides, I'll talk a little bit more about mobile rats or mobile remote access Trojans, and talk about some of the behaviors that we see on an ongoing basis. And then we'll talk more broadly a lot about the data hiding apps that are out there. In addition, a lot of these behaviors can also stem from a device that's become compromised, jailbroken, rooted, privilege escalation, custom ROMs, and so forth. And so as a result, there are definitely unlocked behaviors that can happen as a result of a compromised device. Furthermore, when I get deeper into some of the mobile app behaviors, there's also concepts relating to decoy files, things that allow you to remain covert despite the best detections that are out there. So although somebody may be looking for a malicious mobile app or a mobile app that allows you to communicate covertly, how you hide that data may not be singularly. In other words, it may not be hidden in a particular file, but a series of files that also include a bunch of decoy files, thus making it infinitely more difficult to detect. And then, as I mentioned, if time permits, I'll talk a little bit more about some of the Wi-Fi security research that I've been doing over the years as it relates to beacon stuffing, virtual Wi-Fi. I think it's important, though, to first take an initial look at the threat landscape and really, why do people hide data? Well, although we can certainly become increasingly concerned around corporate espionage, whether that be cyber espionage or more related to a corporate network or an insider threat, certainly also people, especially in this day and age, want to maintain their privacy as well. And in addition to that, we may find covert communications as it relates to malware that may impact financial institutions and those particular mobile apps. So although you may be looking for these risks, you may be identifying a variety of mobile apps across your enterprise, maybe the intent behind it isn't what you initially thought. So sometimes we find organizations will have an initial knee-jerk reaction, which is good because awareness is always good, but there's also the intent, and it's not always malicious. Just kind of an interesting history nugget that kind of bridges this to mobile. You may have seen a few years back where McAfee released some security research at Black Hat and DEF CON related to Operation Shady Rat. And this was something that they had tracked for 5, maybe arguably 7 years in terms of a remote access Trojan, which allowed remote command and control and exfiltration of data from a variety of government agencies and impacted a lot of countries around the world. It was probably one of the most impactful research around this particular topic. In addition, it does have correlations to mobile rats or remote access Trojans. In particular, if we kind of take a look at the flow here, whether it's distributed through an email, a phishing email with a malicious link. Lacoon had done research, now owned by Checkpoint, had done research around identifying malicious links that were sent through WhatsApp and the WhatsApp app. But however you distribute this and convince the user to click on the link, you can now, of course, leverage the ability to deploy one of these Trojans onto a device. Okay, so nothing special there, right? But where it gets into the interesting aspect is that now, with that capability, whether it be WordPress or something else, you can host a picture file or other types of content that this app can actually download and update itself dynamically. So if you're looking for destination IPs that might be malicious, if you're looking for malicious sites, this now hides amongst, somewhat innocuous sites like WordPress. And then, of course, as it goes through those updates and can update dynamically, then allow that remote command and control and exfiltration of data. All right. So what the heck are we looking for here then? If I have concerns around an individual in an organization that may be performing some form of corporate espionage, maybe there's some type of suspicious behaviors, what kind of apps, what kind of behaviors am I actually looking for? Well, just like any other category, there's a whole variety of covert communication, data hiding, steganography type apps littered across the Apple App Store, Google Play, and even the Windows Store as well. StegDroid is kind of interesting. I picked a few here that we've done research around that were a little bit different than your average, like I took a picture and I hit a message or another picture in it, and then I emailed it. This one takes advantage of audio files, or an OGG format, which you may be familiar with, also sometimes commonly correlated to ringtones, and allows you the ability to hide a message in some kind of audio recording, but furthermore, provides the ability that once you've hidden your content and you want to send it, it'll also purge it from the app once you perform that behavior, thus kind of covering up any kind of forensic identification other than this strange, known to be steganography type of app. In addition, you can also leverage encryption with it as well. So StegDroid is for Android. OpenPuff is also quite interesting. OpenPuff was one of the first apps that we identified a while back that actually provides the ability to disperse your hidden data across multiple files and additionally pick your own decoy files. So you're sending out a flurry of files, maybe 20 files. Only a couple of those contain the data, which by the way is spread amongst multiple files, along with a whole littering of decoy files too. So you think about, identifying this on the network, identifying the behaviors in a mobile device makes it a lot more difficult, of course, with it spread across a lot of decoy files and other things that lead you down dead paths. In addition, you can go ahead and apply passwords, and then these passwords get dynamically assigned to the specific files. So you pick multiple passwords, and then those passwords are dynamically assigned to the different files. Only the recipient who knows about this, who receives the files, can of course use the same app and any relevant passwords to go ahead and decipher and also set aside the decoy files themselves. Hide It Pro is also a pretty cool app. It's available for Android as well as Windows Phone. I've used it in Android. It's pretty cool. It hides an app within an app. So what looks to be kind of an innocuous multimedia app, if you know to click on it 10 times in a row, it will unlock the hidden app feature, which now appears, prompts you for your passcode that you set when you initially installed it, and then allows you to go ahead and hide data, and then send that steganized data in a overlay file to whoever you may want to send it to. And then, of course, there's apps for iOS as well, such as Stega IS and also SpyPix. All right, so I did some research, and 2 weeks ago was out in Oslo, Norway, to speak at HackCon. And it was kind of interesting. I had found a PIN bypass vulnerability for the Samsung smartwatches, and went through responsible disclosure, wrote a hacking tool around it, and demoed it at DEF CON last year. Samsung, by the way, was awesome to work with, and they issued a patch. So I thought that was like the interesting aspect of the presentation that I did at HackCon in Norway. But quite frankly, what was most fascinating, or what I kind of had a lot of people asking me questions about, was actually pairing apps and their behaviors, and in particular, one that I'm going to highlight here. So they'll be posting some of the more detailed smartwatch security research that I presented at HackCon on their site. So if this is of particular interest to you around smartwatch risks to the enterprise and various types of hacking on smartwatches, that's what the presentation more broadly covered. And they'll be posting that to the site. But let's focus on the mobile app for a moment. So, of course, many of us have smartwatches today, and when you go to use these smartwatches, quite commonly there's a pairing app that's either comes by default in your iPhone, if it's your Apple Watch, or a pairing app that you can download for the relevant platform, whether it's for Windows, whether it's for iOS, or for Android. An interesting aspect about that is the pairing app is not really required. So you can still, many times, pair your smartwatch with your mobile device without the need for the pairing app. So in the research lab, we took 3 common smartwatches and then kind of an uncommon watch. And just so we had like a nice cross-section for our research. They included the Samsung Gear 2 Neo, which doesn't actually run Android Wear, but runs Tizen, because Samsung has moved a lot of their smartwatches to the Tizen platform. We also tested the Apple Watch, which of course runs watchOS. We additionally tested the Moto 360, which arguably is the most popular Android Wear smartwatch. And then fourthly, this random watch we decided to buy off of eBay, which I now determined is by far the most common smartwatch you can buy on eBay, known as the U8, which runs a weird embedded operating system known as Nucleus. So if you were concerned about the Android fragmentation, just take a look at smartwatches, and the quantity of different operating systems out there is pretty mind-boggling. So one of the unrealized things that we kind of found in our research was, this Chinese smartwatch. We were certainly suspicious about it. We couldn't find much online about it. When we got it, it came with a little slip of paper with a random IP address where you could download the pairing app for either iOS or for Android. Yep. And so, of course, we did this in a test lab with stuff we could crash and burn with. And so when we went ahead and installed the pairing app, we started to do some dynamic analysis and behavioral analysis. And one of the things we actually discovered was that once we paired the smartwatch with our iOS and Android devices, that it started communicating outbound over a random IP address to China. We don't know what the IP was. It didn't resolve to anything, and it was an over-encrypted channel, so it's very difficult to determine what it was actually sending. But it was definitely suspicious. It was definitely a mobile app, right? A pairing app related to a smartwatch. And so, in terms of corporate espionage, in terms of data exfiltration, in terms of data risks, there's definitely a lot of interesting and suspicious behaviors there. We're taking a closer look at this, and in the next version of a report that we release, we'll hopefully have some new insights into that. But it did prompt me to write a tool. and that tool I wrote is SWATAC. SWATAC can be either kind of a hacking tool, or it can be a forensics acquisition tool. So, again, if you have an individual that you're investigating, if you have suspicions around corporate espionage, you can go above and beyond just actually looking at the mobile device and looking at the mobile apps. But if there's a relevant smartwatch involved, there are ways in which you can acquire the data from it and perhaps even find that hidden data on it. I extended it even further, and what I demonstrated at DEF CON and spoke about was that you could also use it to hide data too. So some of the ingredients for running this. A lot of times when you want to interact with these smartwatches, you need to download the relevant SDK. As we mentioned, a lot of them run a plethora of different operating systems and different versions. In this example, I ran this with Samsung, which runs Tizen, so use the Tizen SDK. And then in addition to that, I used Python, USB cable. If you're running an Android Wear device that only communicates over Bluetooth, it is possible to use the Android Debug Bridge to communicate over Bluetooth and connect to the smartwatch as well. So I went ahead and took advantage of the fact that I could acquire the data from the device, a suspicious device that you may be investigating, and furthermore, a lot of these devices don't require a PIN and they have no resident encryption on them. But even in the case where it may require a PIN, we found a variety of different PIN bypass vulnerabilities that still allowed us to not necessarily get to the interface on the smartwatch, but connect to it via the USB, bypass the PIN, do privilege escalation, and acquire the data from the smartwatch. And just a little bit of output from the SWATAC tool. So, of course, all these mobile devices and their communications have implications in terms of their network communications, in this case, over Wi-Fi. For a long time, there's been this capability in Windows to do virtual Wi-Fi, and it still exists today. As I've worked with a lot of organizations over the years, I'm still quite surprised that most people are not aware of this capability. It does allow you to set up a virtual, like what looks like an actual physical access point in a virtual nature, far above and beyond an ad hoc network like we're traditionally used to. This virtual Wi-Fi then can be set up as a rogue AP and can possibly used to communicate covertly over some kind of covert channels. Setting it up is quite easy, just requires a few commands from the command line. And in addition, you can define, hey, if people are going to be connecting to my virtual Wi-Fi on my Windows laptop, what level of security do I want to use, or do I want to use none at all? So I could set this up, allow people to connect through my laptop to the corporate network. The implications of this are quite interesting because whether the laptop is physically connected to the network or over the secure Wi-Fi, you can allow somebody in the neighboring parking lot, a neighboring building, or someone else nearby to actually have access to the corporate network and circumvent all of your best security in terms of WPA2, enterprise, AES encryption, certificates, and all of that. So in terms of the laptop, you set up the virtual Wi-Fi, user comes in for the day, connects to the corporate network, say over a physical network cable, then proceeds to share that out over the virtual Wi-Fi, maybe just an open network, and allow anybody, including the malicious intruder, to remotely connect in and steal the data through that actual laptop. And in our testing, this also works over enterprise access points using the best level of encryption and any other type of authentication schemes. So since that laptop, which is a sanctioned device, is allowed to connect to the corporate network, let's say using certificate-based authentication, AES encryption, WPA2, enterprise, etc., now that he's authenticated and on the network, he can then set up that virtual Wi-Fi and share that out to any user he wants as an open Wi-Fi network and just have a clear pass right into the corporate network. So, of course, this creates a nice channel for corporate espionage as well. maybe a lot more localized, but nonetheless allows you this really nice exfiltration type of mechanism. How do I detect this? Well, if you take a look at the packets and you're familiar with Wireshark, of course, when you're looking at this from a Wi-Fi perspective, 99% of a lot of these Wi-Fi packets are more around layer 2 than they are layer 3 and above. And as a result, even if I'm not associated to the access point, I can go ahead and promiscuously sniff the wireless network, and I can see all of these handshakes, everything from the probe request to the probe response, as well as the beacon packets. And now if you actually want to detect this behavior, you'll see that you've got devices that are communicating both as a client as well as an access point, right? You'll see beacon packets coming from an actual access point, but realize it's the same device as an actual physical laptop in your environment. Taking this a step further, went ahead and modified a DDWRT and allowed us to go ahead and take advantage of something called beacon stuffing. Beacon stuffing is actually a concept that, believe it or not, that Microsoft came up with, which would allow you to hide data in the information element, or IE field, of an actual beacon packet. Of course, beacon packets are wide open, unauthenticated, and just randomly communicating clear text. And as a result, there are a lot of unused fields in the beacon packets, including this IE field. And so we're able to inject and hide data in this IE field, 256 bytes, and randomize that over time to actually communicate data over these beacon packets. Just seem to be just randomly broadcasting with hidden data in it. So this just gives you a little bit more insight into an actual packet where you could possibly hide data, as we demonstrated in our book and some presentations in the past, for example, at DEF CON, in hiding this data in these beacon packets, thus allowing you to communicate that even over enemy lines if you wanted to. And just a Wireshark packet capture that shows you kind of what that looks like in communicating and collecting the beacon packets and then deciphering all of the element fields, including the informational element field. So in terms of mitigation and prevention, I kind of covered a broad spectrum of different types of threats, ranging from mobile remote access Trojans, or MRAPs, to a lot of various types of covert communicating, data hiding types of mobile apps, to different types of techniques that we've seen across some of the smartwatch pairing apps that could also allow for rogue covert communications unbeknownst to the user in even an enterprise environment. And then lastly, also the ability over Wi-Fi, which you could do with a lot of these mobile devices, and communicate various types of covert data as well. In terms of the detections, though, there are a variety of methods you could take. Traditionally, we've seen people try to blacklist mobile apps with their MDM or their EMM, use some kind of app reputation or mobile threat prevention to actually categorize these apps on an ongoing basis across the App Store, Google Play, and the Windows Store, and furthermore mapping out a lot of these apps that are not even in the curated app stores. In addition, some of these apps actually require maybe some type of side loading, or actually that the device be rooted or jailbroken in order to install the app. So if you're doing that, OS compromised, jailbroken, root detections, certainly there's a lot of capabilities you could leverage there, and furthermore with app categorizations and reputation and mobile threat prevention. And then if you're concerned about those Wi-Fi threats, I know that there are a number of wireless IPSs out there that detect some of what I've outlined as well. So that leaves just a couple minutes left for Q&A. Go ahead. Not that I've seen yet. Yeah, not that I've seen yet, or that we've detected. We've been taking a look at some of the network type of behaviors. For example, we have seen some of the apps communicate over Bluetooth. Does that mean that they communicate over Wi-Fi? I would think likely so, but we haven't detected that yet. One of the apps, though, that I highlighted earlier will allow you to communicate over Bluetooth. So, Microsoft, Kind of did, in that they were trying to get retailers to use it to send out coupons, kind of like a blue light special when you walk into a retail store. They detect that you didn't turn off the Wi-Fi on your mobile device. Maybe you have their particular app, and you get a notification that there's a coupon because they detected you're in the store, kind of thing. Yep. So I know Motorola was messing around with that, and Apple has a little bit as well since then. So, any other questions? Yeah, so I think the question was related to other aspects of the actual mobile device itself, like IMEI or UDID or things like that. Yeah. So it's kind of a good point. So if you're doing wireless analysis, you're looking at the actual packets, there may be other aspects above and beyond just the MAC address that you might be able to correlate to the actual device. You see it in the air, you don't know where the device is, what is it? Certainly the OUI in the MAC address field might allow you to determine like, oh, okay, this is an iOS device, or this is a Dell device, or, things like that. Yep. So.
Sorry, if there's any more questions, we're going to have to ask you to contact the speaker in the lounge. It was a great talk.
Great. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Awesome.